how we manage funds. So I'm going to go over that with you right now, actually. I'm going to do a pretty brief version. So, over here. Right. So the SSCCC budget policy is publicly available on the SSCCC website under Finance. And also the MOU between the Chancellor's Office, the SSCCC, and the service agreement between the Foundation and the SSCCC can also be found under the Finance page. So that's this page right here. Finances. All right. So here are the table of contents. I'm not going to go in great depth because it's been a whole lot of time talking about this in particular. I remember I had a 3-hour meeting with a former BPF and he was just explaining all the fine print of why it is how it is.
I'm still learning.
It takes yeah. All right, so let's just go straight into funding, core funding. So how is core funding determined? Well, that's we do that by revenue tiers. There are 3 revenue tiers. So that essentially means that however much money we have in the account, April 15th come around, we have a certain amount of money in the account. That determines where our core funding of that year is going to be. So let's just up to $200,000. All funds, core funding, are managed by the foundation. Right now, we're kind of in a middle process. Right now, we pay the foundation about $3,000 per month. We're not specifically following this as of yet. But when we receive more funds, we will be following this more strictly. Tier 2, $200,000 to $1 million. The 2K in core funding will be managed by the foundation. After 2K in core funding, any amount above 200K release will be evenly split between funds managed by the foundation and funds managed internally by the SSCCC. Tier 3, above $1 million. 2K in core funding managed by the foundation. Any revenue excess to 200K will be evenly split between funds managed by the foundation and funds managed internally by the SSCCC. Any revenue in excess of $100,000 will be split 1/4 going to funds managed by the foundation, 3/4 going to funds managed internally by the SSCCC. So that is kind of establishing revenue tiers where we're at, how we're going to use our money there. Okay, so. All right, revenue rollover, that's something that we should talk about. This is kind of controversial. When the 2 SRF was initially being put in place, well, first, the revenue rollover essentially says that anything in the budget at the end of the term will go back to the foundations. Every semester, it starts over again. So the money we receive from the 2 SRF is the money we have that year. And as of now, we're not necessarily following that process, but that will be the case again when we receive more funds. So at first I was like, why are we just giving all the money in our budget to the foundation? Well, the reason behind that is we want to separate power, right? We don't want, when the 2 SRF was being implemented, it was like $2.1 million in the SSCCC's hand, and that's going to accumulate over time. Like, we don't want that much money and that much power in the hands of people who are only getting the office for 1 year, or people who don't necessarily have a whole bunch of experience and have to learn when they enter the position. So there's kind of that uncertainty, and it's kind of a protection measure for the SSCCC. So we're not necessarily liable for any sort of issues that go. So that doesn't necessarily go to the foundation. They take that money and they hold it for if we ever have like a rainy day, or if we want to support like an initiative that's extremely expensive, then we can reach into those reserve funds that the SSCCC Foundation has. So again, it's the protection measure for our organization, and it splits up that sort of power, so we're not accumulating these funds. Sure.
Yeah. Do you know what the fund is right now for the foundation?
The fund is, they don't, currently we only have our account with the foundation, and that's because, again, this is like really new stuff. So the exact number, I think it's public. Last time I checked, we had about $219,000 for operations. We have a draft of the budget, so I'll go over how we drafted that budget. So really quick, I should go over why I'm telling you this. This is super important because when introducing this to your ASO, You want to be able to tell them how this money is being spent, how it's being organized. So this process is super important in presenting the 2 SRF, because it's not just like you're just sending off this dollar and who knows what happens to it. This is what's going to happen, and this is how we manage our funds. Okay, so categorical funding. So how the SSCCC is actually funded. So we did this term, yes?
I just wanted to go back to the executive director.
Yes.
I mean, we're a lot bigger than the UC and CSU
Yep.
system, so I imagine we'd have to pay ours a lot more. I don't know what are there, almost 30, how many UCs are there and how many CSUs?
A lot less, but we wouldn't necessarily have to pay that position more. But it may mean that we need more staff.
Yeah,
So
I was thinking
that's,
offices, staff, furniture, benefits.
yeah. So as of right now, the executive director, it's kind of undisputed we need an executive director. All the other systems have an executive director, but that conversation of how many more staff members do we need, that's an ongoing conversation. Like, do we need regional advisors?
Do we
That's
know how
something.
much they're paid?
Oh, I would say, no, we don't know. We don't know the exact amount. All right, so how is SSCCC funded? We determine the tier that it's at, and then all excess revenue that we have, say if we have say if we had $360,000, we meet the second revenue tier. Whatever, then the foundation, part of that goes to the foundation. Whatever we have left over, we have a committee fund request form, which was recently drafted by me and adopted by the board of directors. What we do is we get that amount, how much we have, and we send that to the chairs of each committee. So committees are super, super important, and I would advise all of you to be up to date with what's going on in committees and up to date with board of directors meetings. So committees are also kind of like the arms and legs of the activity within the SSCCC. So each committee chair receives that form saying, oh, hey, there's $150,000 up for grabs this year. So then the committees will say, Legislative Affairs Committee, for example, Cameron would say, hey, I think we may need $35,000 this year. And in the committee form, there's a little print to explain why you need those funds. And regional treasurers will also help out with help chairs kind of come up with this, fill out this form and come up with this committee budget. So they fill out this form, say how much they need, and that form is then sent to the Finance Committee. Finance Committee reviews these forms, and then they say, wow, Equitable Practice Committee asked for $80,000 this year, and Legislative Affairs only asked for like $35,000 this year. So we don't feel like this is justified, so, and we feel like Legislative Affairs, this is justified. So that funding, that's when the funding is actually approved in the financial committee. So that's composed of treasurers and hopefully soon directors. So then sent to Finance Committee, then it's approved. When it's approved, that is sent out back to the chairs of the committees. The chairs of the committees are allowed to appeal the decision made by the Finance Committee. If they appeal that decision, it's then sent to the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors then reconsiders it and makes a decision on how the funding should be approved. But hopefully Finance Committee does a really good job and there are no appeals to be made. This year, we're working with a very small budget. I think there's only like $20,000 that we can give to all committees, which is pretty low.
That you can give to who?
To committees. To all committees. So,
Can I ask something about committees? So I just want to say, so, our committees are on our website, and like, I think a lot of people in this room probably won't ever interact with the committees, although you totally can. But the thing is, like, these committees, to give you an example, so the General Assembly is put on by the Events Committee, which I'm on, and are you on that committee?
Yes, I am.
So we're both on that committee. And that's a big deal because these committees put on these events. And so it's the same thing with, like, for example, the regional affairs committees. I mean, these committees make the organization function. So without the funding for these committees, we wouldn't have this conference. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we do with the regions. If anybody here is part of the region, like, we would not be able to do these things if it were not for that funding. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this 2SRF is going to be really important moving forward.
And Lee brought me off of that. If there is a breakout session that you would like to see in the future, call into the events committee and say, hey, we want to see this breakout. Chances are we'll have that breakout. So. Then we're going to go on to discretionary funding balance and discretionary funding. So say if we only delegate a certain amount to committees don't ask for a whole lot that year, then whatever's left over goes into discretionary funding. Now what discretionary funding is essentially funding that committees can use after the fact. So say events committee asks for $50,000, but then after they ask for $50,000, a new event comes up. It's like Region 3. And events committee says, we want to hold an event in Region 3, but it's going to cost this amount of money. The treasurer will work with the chair of that committee, and they will fill out a discretionary fund request. And if it's in the budget, in the discretionary funds, then that discretionary funds request will be reviewed and hopefully approved by the finance committee. Yes?
Curious, how come you're talking about discretionary funds when we're asking, colleges for donations? I mean, if you don't have the money and you say there's a shortfall, the funds be non-existent?
Yes, and they are non-existent right now. This is a budget policy not just for this Senate, it is a budget policy for Senates in the future as well. We hope that this will serve as a guide for when we do have the 2SRF implements on more campuses. So this is, we're thinking long term.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and some of you guys in this room, like, you guys could potentially be, next year, you guys could end up being on the SSCCC board. And so it's really important that you guys understand, like, this right, as of right now, this is based on years and years and years of previous work that everyone has kind of collectively put together. And we're just now getting to a point where we can take this and we can say, okay, this is working, this is how it's gonna work, and we can get there. And so it's important for you guys on your ASOs, but also if you ever do end up joining the board, to understand, like, this is important because we need this for the organization. Like I said, if we don't have these funds, if we are at a deficit, that puts everybody at a disadvantage, and it really affects things like the General Assembly. And I think the General Assembly is huge, and we do a lot of great stuff. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yes.
Is the online, the new college, is it gonna be part of SSCCC at all, or contribute anything, or?
SSCCC, the whole purpose is to serve all community college students, and that includes the online campus. However, how the 2SRF look to be implemented on the online campus, I'm not sure.
Do they have a student government?
No, they do not.
What are the events does the SSCCC put on throughout the year?
So-
That's not GA.
This is something that I am kind of salty about. SSCCC is becoming known as the organization that only puts on GA, and the reason for that is there hasn't necessarily been the structure in the past to put on more events other than GA. So again, the students you see up at the podium, they are students and they do work jobs. I'm a math tutor at my college, and I work there, and I do other things. I'm also a research assistant at my local state university. So we're all pretty busy people. So in the past, we haven't necessarily had the structure to make these events easy. And the reason why GA has been an ongoing thing is because the Chancellor's Office has kindly held our hand through it. So as we become more independent, as we develop these structures, then holding events becomes easier. And so what kind of other events do we put on? There has been the March in March.
Yeah.
That the SSCCC has done in the past. There's been other events that SSCCC has done in the past. What events are we planning on doing as a board? Well, right
You're
now,
talking about bringing back March and March. So
yeah, we're gonna bring back March in March.
We will be bringing that back.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to
That's
explain
it.
what that is?
That's a resolution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pending the approval, pass.
You were on the board.
resolution. I was, yes.
I'll go for it.
So what other events would plan on doing town halls? Right now, the executive team, the board of directors, is focusing on improving the organization, on making sure that we're really solid moving forward to fix that institutional memory problem that we're having, and all the other problems that we're seeing. So for events, we're not really focusing on like, we want to have like a whole bunch of events in like all the regions. Right now we want regions active, and that's why I took up the position as VPRA. It's because I saw an issue and I want to address that. So right now let's get people active, let's get our organization strong, and we're gonna have events catered to that. So for example, we're gonna have town halls where we're gonna have the exec team actually go out to colleges in California and talk to student governments that have been inactive, and talk to students and kind of explain what's going on and how they can get involved. And then once we kind of have that foundation built up, we can move forward from there.
Yeah, and to kind of connect that back to funding, a big problem with events is, so like as you guys have heard, General Assembly typically in the past has been at a loss, and we're working on changing that. But that's the thing, right? So if we're losing money on this, and this is essentially like, I would say a flagship event, right? I mean, this is a big deal for us. Then, you know, looking at the budget, not just losing money on this conference, but having a low budget to work with in general, and this is why the 2SRF is so crucial, is because we don't have the funding to do all the events that we would like to do. We have plenty of ideas. We really do. We have a lot of ideas. We have a great board this year, and like Josh said, we're very focused on organization. We want this thing to last long term, and we're focused on that. But that's why the 2SRF is so crucial, because if we can get it in a lot of colleges, then that's going to help us secure that funding, and that funding is in turn going to help us do events. And that's just not just events at the state level, but it also allows us to work with colleges and regions and things like that too. And because that's a big problem right now is regional funding.
Right.
And so the 2SRF will even help with that. So
really quick, I'll give one example and then I'll get to your question. So one example of an event that we would like to do is recently we were in contact with Obama's personal aide when he was in office, and working with her and talking to her, she's very interested in getting involved in the SSCCC. So having like a TED Talk hosted by like a college in like a region down south, a region up north. These are sorts of events that we would like to see. And we would like to try and get away from like SSCCC only does GA. So that's what we're planning in the future. So budget development pretty
Wait,
much.
the question.
Oh, yes.
So other than the 11 schools that have the $2 rep fee now, the other 104, whatever it is, have $1 rep fees? All of them?
Some of them don't even have the $1 student representation fee.
Including the
last one.
online college, I'm assuming?
Sorry?
Including the online college?
Including the online college.
Yeah, some colleges don't even receive $1 for their student funding. So that's one of the big things I think with the 2SRF is, again, that money not just goes to us, because $1 goes to us, but I mean that money goes back in helping everybody else too, which is why I think it's so important, because it helps both parties really, and that's a good thing.
That goes to your
I guess we'll take that question over there.
How would like homeless students or students that are in need of aid will be helped with this extra $1?
That's a very, very good question. So it all goes back to like representation, as we said. College of the Redlands specifically, 1/3 of our students are housing insecure. I personally was homeless for half a semester. It's not easy. It's certainly not easy. So having a student such as myself, or a student who was homeless, or having students at the table who have these experiences, who we can pay to be at the table, that makes all the difference in pushing these things in legislature. So actually going to the Capitol and meeting with people, that's what we do every month. Not every month, that's what we want to
We're
do.
in Sacramento.
That's what we want to do every month.
Yeah.
We want to go to Sacramento.
Anytime we're in Sacramento, I mean, that's the thing, like, so, and, you know, because you guys not being directly involved necessarily with the organization, when we hold our board meetings in Sacramento, we're not just going there and we're having our board meeting. We're going there and we're talking to our local representatives and our state representatives, and we're saying, hey, these are the things that our students want. And homelessness and things like that, food insecurity, these things are really important, and these are things that we have been advocating for in the past and we continue to advocate for. And so that's a big deal when it comes to us being in Sacramento, is that's one of the big things that we do while we're out there.
So to answer your question more specifically, the regional dollar may go towards regional activities, so going to your local representatives and like taking them out for lunch and talking to them or whatever, paying for travel, lodging for student representation, for student representatives, to really bring this issue to people in power. On a statewide level, that would go towards us as an organization. So a resolution could be passed. We can be talking to we could be talking about this in the Capitol. We can host events that help people in certain regions. Say one region is impacted by it, more than other regions. We can have a specific event. The options here with the funding are kind of limitless. So I'm gonna go over here and answer it.
So, you take this information and go back to our campus. How do we sell this back to, students that are on financial aid, that are in need for funds, to charge them an extra $2 for, on top of what they can't afford already?
You tell them that there's an opt-out fee. So not an opt-out fee, an opt-out process. So they can opt out. If they really can't afford it, they can opt out. So this is, the way I see it is, students who can't afford it, really, they can opt out. And at the same time, if you can afford it, then that's gonna make things better for us as a state. So if we come together and really utilize our strength in numbers, which is the whole point behind the 2 SRF, by asking not a lot from a lot of people, we can do better for the whole good. It's better than asking a lot from a few people. So that's the whole goal. We want to utilize our strength in numbers, and that's a luxury that UC students and CSU students will have. There was another question over here, yes?
Oh, yeah, I just kept hearing that there's more trips, but you guys are already in Sacramento. So what other trips are you talking about that you have to go out to advocate for something like that?
Other trips?
Yeah, that's what you mentioned earlier, you said other trips. But if you're already in Sacramento and you're already advocating for us there, what other trips are you talking about going with this extra $?
So our main priority, because our organization is focused on California, obviously Sacramento is the big priority as far as advocacy goes on the legislative side. But one of the things that we're actually going to start working on doing is we're actually working to work with other state advocacy groups and go out to Washington D.C. and advocate at the federal level as well. So that would be another cost, for example, and that's something that we're gonna try to do. But again, if let's say we send out, so there are 10 regions, right? And every region has a legislative affairs director who works on legislative affairs in that region. They do legislature and advocacy. If we wanted to send out all 10 of those directors plus our vice president of legislative affairs, that's a huge cost because you're talking about flights, which are very expensive. I mean, that's actually a huge part of our budget is just the cost of flights and hotels. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that we could do. But yeah, did that answer your question? There are other things too, but yeah.
So also I'm going to say, what we have been doing in the past, a lot of legislative affairs directors and a lot of members of SSCCC do travel out of their own pocket to town halls that are being hosted by potential candidates for office. So that's another way that we can make those trips more frequently, and we can provide reimbursements for people who want to go on those trips.
Yeah. So can I add to that really quick, and then we'll get to the question. So so to give you an example, I live about an hour from here, but I actually just recently drove up to Los Angeles because we were working with a system partner who held a town hall with the new lieutenant governor candidates. So that's a big thing as well. You know what I mean? It's just going to these events with these potential candidates at the state level and saying, hey, what are you guys going to do for students when you're in office? So yeah. So
really quick, I'm just going to finish this really quick. So the last thing is budget development. That pretty much outlines the date at which each criteria needs to be met. So this tells you when the budget's going to be out, when you should be getting forms out, when you should be getting forms back. And you can review all this online as well. So, yeah, questions?
This wasn't really a question. I kind of just also wanted to touch on, I didn't see who asked the question, but I'm going to stop this recording now. That's cool. Okay.